This visualization can be used in two different ways by a teacher. The first way is to understand the student performance in tests over time, and the second way is to really drill into the topics that were covered in the test and compare them test versus test. Let's quickly go through a few features of this visualization. In this top section, we can really filter on the information that we want to see. We can use the select date range to really filter in the time frame that we want to look at the students' results. We can then select the test number that we really want to focus on. And finally, we can see all the topics that are covered in this in-class test 3. In this middle section, we can understand the individual student result as well as how that student performed in the test within each individual topic. If we look at the individual students' results, we can see the scores that each student scored within the test. If we look at the topic results, this is where we can see, as a class, how the topics were answered across the whole quiz. We can further drill into how each individual student performed simply by clicking on their name, and we can see the topic results of how Barbara has scored across this test within each topic. We can select multiple students to see how they're performing. If we look in this lower section, we can see how each individual question was answered by all students within the class. We can see that question 5 was answered the most correctly by students. And if we look right down the end, question 6 was a question that most students had problem with only 40% of students getting it right. Here's a great way to really dive into those individual questions so you're really getting your bang for your buck of questions to revise after the test. Now that we've had a quick look at the individual test results, now we can combine multiple test results together and compare the results. In this example, I'm going to select one-step multiplication and division equations and see how the whole class has performed across the whole term. So all I need to do is filter that down into the test that it was done. So now I've filtered down to understand how the class has performed in one-step multiplication and division equations. I can look further into the data. So we can see in this middle section the individual student results just on one-step multiplication and division equations. We can dive further into the student information and really highlight from an individual student point of view how each student has performed in this one-step multiplication and division equations. So in Michael's example, his in-class test 1, he scored 0%. In test 2, he scored 100%. And then in test 3, he scored 33%. So here we can really understand over time how each individual student performs based on the topic over a certain period of time. We can look further into other student details simply by clicking on their name and seeing how they performed. So in this case, we saw that Thomas scored 100% in in-class test 1, about 75% in in-class test 2, and then in the topic test term 3, he scored about 35%. So now we're able to look at individual students and how they're performing in certain topics, not only over weeks, months, terms, and years, but over multiple years once the data is collected. This class performance visualization really lets the teacher to be able to dive in to their class performance, but most importantly, the individual performance on every student, and really give them the help that they need in the areas that they need help.